talk about this for a very long time. And finally, thanks to Deb Holm, who really twisted his arm today, we got him here. So I promised that I would kind of do my little part by talking just a little bit, about the history of Hurstville. So some of you who maybe don't know about Hurstville will know what Bob is talking about when we get around to his part. Okay, so, and actually I have to give the newspaper credit because part of this story, it's kind of a little synopsis of Hurstville that was in the paper in the Maquoketa Sentinel Press a very long time ago, and so I've changed it around a little bit, but a lot of this came from them. And so, first of all, you see our beautiful lime kilns here. Can you see? Sure? Okay. You see our beautiful lime kilns here that we are so very proud of. They're beautiful in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, and in the winter. They're even beautiful when they're underwater, which happens a couple times a year. But we're going to be working on that, right? So the person that we have to thank for all this, of course, is Alfred Hurst. And Alfred purchased the land. It's a little over a mile north of Maquoketa, just this side of the river. Actually, he was on both sides of the river. And he came here in 1871, and he erected his first lime kiln at that time. And then his brother William Hurst joined him, and they eventually built 3 more lime kilns, which was the start of a wonderful lime industry here in Jackson County. And I just want to show you some of the old pictures, just so you can get a feel of what it was like. This is the second quarry that he opened up. It's right across the North Fork. And there are some of the men. He hired many, many men. He usually had about 50 men, we're told, working at all times, quarrying limestone, or in the winter, cutting wood for the limestone. But this is his quarry that was right across the river, and he built a bridge, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about, to carry the limestone to the kilns. And the way he did this was really quite ingenious. Here you see them coming down from the top of the quarry. It was all these ore cars filled with rocks or big boulders of limestone. It was all run by gravity. They just loaded up the cars and started them running, and they came down the bluff, across the river on a bridge that he built, and right to the foot of the lime kilns that we just saw there. So that was pretty ingenious, I think. And we always talk about the 4 wonderful lime kilns, and this is the way they looked when they were completed. And you can see the smokestacks to the back where the actual kilns were. The part that's not there anymore are the wooden cooling sheds that you see across the front. The platforms are still there under the cooling sheds, but the reason that those were there was to cool the limestone. These kilns were about 30 foot high from the ground up to the top of the kilns. They gathered hardwood from local forests, and they got hardwood from all over Jackson County and really beyond from the local forests. And they built large fires under the grates at the base of these kilns. They maintained 900 degrees in heat. And they started in the very earliest of spring. They started the fires. Those fires in the kilns burned 24/7 until it became so cold as winter came on that they could not maintain the 900 degrees. And then at that time, they closed down for a short time over the winter. The purpose of this was that the 900 degree heat drove the water and the carbon dioxide out of the limestone, and then it became a white powder that was called quicklime. These cooling sheds were important because when the lime was at 900 degrees, they raked it out onto these cement platforms that are under these roofs that you see here, and they spread it out and they allowed it to dry. And then when it dried, it was packed into barrels. Those barrels were manufactured at the Cooper shop in Hurstville, and it was packed in the barrels and shipped out all over the Midwest. So when water and gravel were added to the lime, it made a very good mortar. That's all they had back in the day to build stone walls, brick walls, things like that. That was the mortar that they used. And the thing that made the Hearst limestone in such demand was because of the particular limestone that we had here. It produced, and because he used wood and not coal for his fire, it produced a very pure white product, and that's what builders were looking for. When the lime was mixed with water and sand, then plaster was produced, and when it was thinned still more, it became whitewash. So you can see that this product was really in demand for builders all over the Midwest. Here's just some of the wood. They bought wood from farmers all around, everywhere. Practically denuded the county, but if you look at the good side of it, at least they cleared the land, and so we have wonderful farmland that was cleared because of the kilns, because this was a heavily timbered area back in the day. Excuse me. So, we're told that at times they had over 1 million cords of wood on hand waiting to be burned in the kilns. 4 kilns, 24 hours a day, that took a lot of wood. So, as it progressed, as the business progressed, and Hurstville grew, this is a picture in 1884, just kind of, it's taken from the bluff, the back. You can see the kilns, you can see the smoke that came from the kilns and just billowed out 24/7. There was all of this smoke going off into the, and there were dikes that they built, and horses and mules pulled ore carts across here. The ore cart would stop in front of the kiln. They opened to the side, and they would just dump the ore down into the kilns, and it would fall down into the fire, and the process would begin. So a company town built up around these kilns because of all of the activity was there, of the people that it employed, and this is just a picture of the company town of Hurstville. We know that this was the business office all those years, this little white building. And there's some interesting stories about this little white building. It was robbed a couple times. There's some fun stories, but we won't take time for those today. I believe that maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think maybe this is part of the cooper shop here, and you can see the barrels out in front. And Alfred Hearst built a railroad that we'll talk about that came along the back here. So this is kind of, and this is the old highway that just is still there. Old Highway 61 that runs out, and out here somewhere it meets New Highway 61. So that is what it looked like. They had barracks for single men. I guess I got my pictures out of order. Sorry. There were several stores there. There was the Hurstville Produce Company. This is Abe Hearst, Alfred Hearst actually. This is Abe Hearst, Alfred Hearst, in his first automobile. And but it was just a busy place. Thanks to Bill Lucky, who's helped us so much with Clinton Engine. Bill Lucky was an actual grandson of William Hearst, the brother. And so he has brought us many artifacts and things. One of the things he brought us was the ledger from the store, from this building, that his family run the store. And it was fascinating to read that ledger, 1887 or whatever it was. They sold lobster. They sold the most amazing things in this store. You could buy almost anything there. Things that you would never think that we had around here at that time. They also bought ducks and things from the farmers, and they have those for sale. So everything that anyone would ever need was in this town. The people who lived here didn't even have to leave. There's another thing of the produce company, and I don't know what these are, but anyway, it was just quite an interesting place. They had everybody, not everybody, but many of you will remember the little company houses that were along the road. They were there until when? The 50s? 50s or 60s maybe? And
for sure in 53, because I went to kindergarten there and I know those little houses were
okay.
Still some there in the 70s.
There were still some in the 70s, okay? And we know lots of people who lived in those houses. And it was just a way the unmarried men that worked for Hearst stayed in the barracks, and the married families, if they were fortunate, got a house. Connected to the house, there was an acre of land or two where they had a community garden, where they could keep a cow and pasture a cow. They had everything they needed, and it was all part of their salary is what it came down to be. Connie talked about the Hurstville School. You went to the Hurstville School, Connie?
Yes, I did. Mom taught there for years and I got to go to kindergarten there.
Woo, okay. Anybody else go to Hurstville? It's been a while. Okay, Hurstville School. So sometimes come in, we have lots of pictures of Hurstville School and some of the classes that were there. As you can see, flooding was always a problem in the Hurstville area. Still is. Sometimes about a couple times a year, sometimes it floods, doesn't it? Some years worse than others. But anyway, the Hurstville School, of course, no longer there, but it was part of the company town. It was a little further out. And this was the Hurstville Stockyards. And we're told that as Alfred Hearst bought timberland, and cleared the timberland, of course, then there was farmland, but he had a great cattle business. He raised so many cattle that he needed to get to market that he actually built his own railroad. And there's part of the railroad. So when I say that, he laid the tracks, and he laid, I believe, 2¼ miles of tracks. He laid himself from Maquoketa into Hurstville. There's no turntable, so the Chicago-Milwaukee had to back their train. They have the trains. They had to back their train into Hurstville with all of the stock cars, etc., box cars, and Hearst shipped out cattle, and he shipped out his lime, and all of that sort of thing. That was the busiest stockyard in the whole area, we're told, because a lot of people took their cattle there to be shipped. So it was a very busy place that also added to what was going on in Hurstville. And this is the rock crusher. So Alfred Hearst died in 1915. Just a few years before he died, the lime business really dwindled down, and that was because Portland cement was invented. It was a better product to use for mortar, it was cheaper, easier, whatever, and it just replaced the lime that was the basis of this business. They continued to produce lime. They used this rock crusher to crush rock from their quarries, sold the rock to use on gravel roads, lime to use on the fields and that sort of thing. So they still kept going because Alfred Hearst, if you see this picture up here, and I hope that you'll come up and look at it. This picture, this is a photograph that Bob donated, I understand, and it has every building that was in Hurstville. Do you realize there were horse barns and chicken coops, and there were cooper shops, and there was just about everything there could be as part of this company town. When Alfred Hearst died in 1915, they needed to be able to settle his estate. So they drew this map of everything he owned and where each little thing was located. And that's how they got everything eventually figured out. But the rock crusher is still there, and it now belongs to the Historical Society, as you will hear. But it was an amazing thing, and it's very interesting. If you walk, it's up. If you have to walk up the stairs around the kilns, and it's up on the bluff to the back. It's showing its age, but it's still there. Whoops! It's still there, and it's still wonderful. Not all of this. I think this part is gone right now, but under here there are chutes. There are, I think, 4 chutes where different sized where they crushed different size gravel to come down into the wagons. The wagon drove under here, and the horse and wagon would come under here, and they'd fill the wagon with gravel that came down. So we're really very proud to have this rock crusher. It is not part of the National Register, we're told, but we're very proud to still have that. So this is a map that I put in here for Bob to use, and he'll talk about this a little bit, and he'll explain what part of Hurstville was still there at this time. So the little town of Hurstville, the Kilns, and the surrounding land were all under the control of the Hearst family for many, many, many years. It was always owned by the Hearsts. In 1977, the ownership of the company town and the land passed to Laurel Summers. And it did so because of his late wife, Anne, and she was a granddaughter of Alfred Hearst. So it went down through the family to Laurel Summers. He had come to Hurstville in 1942. He became the mayor of Hurstville in 1944, and he was the mayor of Hurstville for 33 years. He was a little bit, maybe, dictatorial. I didn't know him. But, you know, he really ruled the roost. And nobody wanted to contradict him or argue with him, because he owned the houses, and he owned the property, and he owned the, you know. So it was kind of what he said went. And this went along for a very long time, until all of a sudden, in 1979, the land was purchased by the Hurstville Land and Development Company. And that was made up of 6 local businessmen, as you can see, and their spouses. And we certainly thank them. So you can read their names up there. But they had purchased the town, and I think maybe 500 acres of land is what the newspaper said. Bob will talk a little bit about that, including the Kilns, and it was bought from the estate that was controlled by Laurel Summers. So the Historical Society has many, many wonderful artifacts from Hurstville. There are so many stories that you could talk for weeks about Hurstville and not tell all the stories. But we've always talked about the history because that's all we've known. So I'm really excited that Bob is here and Mona Reisling is here, though she says she's not talking to us. She said no, she's just here. But I'm sure if you ask her questions later, she would. We're really excited that Bob has agreed to come, and he's going to tell us the rest of the story, because these people were wonderful to save this. I mean, this would all be gone if it weren't for these people. So we're very, very grateful. Okay.
I'll stand, I can stand. Let me try to stand.
Okay. You stand until you want to sit.
Okay.
And then you sit. All right, I will get out of your way. Thank you so much.
First off, thank you for being part of an experiment. I have some magic hearing aids that I've not worn and talked on a microphone before, but I may get some feedback and I may give you some. I hope I'm not.
You need to get closer to the microphone.
And secondly, I want to thank Bonnie and everybody at the Historical Society for inviting me here today. I hope that some of the information I can provide you proves to be useful. I intend it to be truthful. And I expect that most of you, as I look around this room, may remember the days before the lime kilns were restored a little bit from the condition that we found them in 1979 when we purchased the property. So when Bonnie asked me and Donna asked me to talk, they provided me with 5 or 6 questions that they suggested that I try to answer. I'll try to read the questions first, and then I'll give you my take on the answer to the questions. first question was, why did the original owners, the Hearst Summers family, decide to sell the property? Well, I think that it was fair to say that we don't know, or I don't know exactly why they decided to sell it. I would say that the lack of maintenance and the repairs that were needed on everything from the fences to the yards, the barns, and so forth, were beginning to overwhelm Mr. Summers. Jerry would know about that. And he may want to, if you want to comment, please, Jerry, help me.
Still fixing the fence.
But, at any rate, the revenue must have fallen considerably from the land. What a lot of people didn't realize or don't realize is that the city limits of Hurstville are over in this map over here, covered everything that's in Hurstville, part of the Schwenker farm, and some lowlands along the river, and the east side of the Maquoketa River where that bridge had been. So it was about 675 acres that became for sale. And I would say that it was just mentioned that Laurel Summers was the mayor for 33 years in Hurstville. Some people might have called him emperor. He was there. Others may have viewed it a little bit differently. But one day, the town was abuzz. Maquoketa was abuzz, at least I thought it was, because there was an ad in the Wall Street Journal that said there's a town for sale in Iowa, Maquoketa, Iowa, and the Summers family was advertising their property to be sold, and it was going to be done by having sealed bids delivered to the courthouse in 1979. I may have the date here and I may not. It was a small ad in the Wall Street Journal, and I think a lot of people weren't paying much attention to Hurstville in those days. And the people that lived in Maquoketa were not. And so the news coverage of that was tremendous. There were stories in the Des Moines Register and the Chicago Tribune about the Wall Street Journal ad. There were stories scattered all over the press, TV coverage, and what have you. And it was a relatively short time, as I recall, about 5 weeks or so from the time the ad appeared until the bids were supposed to be made at the courthouse. So I would say that the opportunity to talk about this and buzz in the coffee shops and the back rooms, the various businesses, the banks and what have you, there was a big buzz to see who's going to end up buying this property. And since it was advertised in the Wall Street Journal, they knew that the market could include bidders from New York or Philadelphia or California or whoever. And there were some bidders from out of state that were interested. And some of them sent people to look over the property. And so there was a lot of speculation about the value of it and what have you. So the question is raised by Bonnie here, or Mrs. Holm. Is there anything different about purchasing an entire town from purchasing, for example, a normal real estate property? And who were the other investors? Their names are up here. I'd say yes, there's quite a bit of difference when you acquire a working city, an existing city government, and so forth. I think that perhaps the realization that Laurel ran the government and the city council, because the council members were all people that were tenants in these houses that you just saw out there. I think there were about 15 houses occupied at the time when we acquired the property. A couple of them were empty, and they were not in the best of shape. So these people, the people who live there, you know, cast their ballots at City Hall, and Laurel accepted their ballots and elected the city council and the city government and what have you. The Summers property, or the Hearst property, was the largest holdings in the city, most significant taxpayer, but there were a lot of other taxpayers involved in Hurstville, and there's other sources of revenue besides property taxes for the city. There's a share of liquor profits, and the DOT provided funds on a basis to the city government, and what have you. So Laurel, you know, made a lot of decisions, or maybe all the decisions for the city. And he complied with the legalities as he saw fit. Heard stories supposedly that when the state authorities were coming to visit, do an audit of the city government of Hurstville and so forth, that Laurel appeared at the road with a shotgun in his hands when the state police came up. So I don't know if that's true or not. That was one of the stories that was told at that particular time. Can everybody hear me?
Is the mic on?
Talking to the microphone.
He is, he's right in front of me.
I'm sorry if I've been talking all this time and nobody can hear me.
We can hear you fine.
Go ahead. My fingers don't always do what I tell them. So when we bought the city of Hurstville, you know, we got the town government by default, and we got the property, you know, as intended. The question is, what was Hurstville like when we bought it? Well, Hurstville was a big farm. It was a collection of antique or perhaps junk equipment and so forth. It had some houses that were substandard. It had two big barns. One of them was in fair condition and one of them was in no condition at the time. There was no church that I know of in Hurstville. There was a city hall, post office. There was a market, country market. Do any of you remember Martha Goodnow? Martha Goodnow was the operator of the market, the country store there, and obviously must have made a living because she was there for a long time. I don't remember how many years, what have you. But the city had a water system, no paved streets, but Highway 61, which ran right through the middle of the town. And the country school was part of the city property. So another question that was asked by the Historical Society here, how did the local residents feel about the purchase of their town? Well, I don't think there was any protest that I know of, or praise particularly for our purchase. I think some people were relieved that it was local people that bought the property as opposed to similar experience that we'd had when New Yorkers bought Clinton engines. And so I think that by and large there was not much in the way of a reaction to our purchasing So what were our initial plans for the property? And what changed about those plans? Well, during the course of the preparation of getting together our bid, we had almost conversations of the 6 of us, or a couple additional partners who were involved or as prospective partners in getting together to make a bid. And it was kind of interesting how we decided to bid for the property. We looked at the number of tillable acres and the non-tillable acres, and we looked at some of the other values that might be ascertained for the land. At this particular time, Highway 61 we knew it was going to be redone, and we knew it was going to become a 4-lane road. We didn't know exactly where it was going to be located, and we didn't know what the prospects were for a big new 4-lane highway coming through, whether it would really increase the growth potential of Macokota or Hurstville or land along the highway, make it more valuable. It was all speculation. So I remember that Bob Stockham suggested that we up our bid after we were agreeing on a number by $1,500, and the rest of us agreed to that. And lo and behold, we did get the bid. We bought the property, 660 some acres, I believe it was altogether, city government, and what have you. And we had no plan for anything other than we were quite sure that the farming operation could continue. We thought maybe we could get that bridge completed back across the river, open the quarry on the east side. And obviously that didn't happen. We daydreamed about a resort, a golf course on the property. We had a design made for the property for a golf course and what have you. And we ended up farming, and Jerry farmed it for a long time, and his dad before him. And it all seemed to work out. One of the questions that is coming up here that came from Bonnie, once the dust settled regarding the acquisition, did you discover any surprises? And what was the biggest surprise? And we certainly did discover some surprises. The biggest surprise, I think, was the fact that the city water was not safe to drink. And an immediate reaction was required. And there are, of course, no funds available in the city treasury to do anything about the water supply. So we ended up having to evict all the residents of the houses because we couldn't guarantee them adequate water. So they were encouraged to seek other habitation. And Martha's store was in a sad shape also because of the city water. But my recollection is, and I might be wrong on this, is that I think we dug a shallow well which did have safe water that supplied the water for the store for a short period of time. We also found out that most of the water in that area had high levels of nitrate and weren't to be consumed by children under 2. So it was that was a bummer. But there was no choices in the matter. So The next question is how did Jackson County Historic Society become the recipient or the owner of the kilns? And I would credit Bob Sheets for the idea of bringing it to the Hurstville owners and suggesting that the kilns should be saved. We all thought it would be a good idea to figure out how to save the kilns. They were really deteriorating. Behind me here is a watercolor that our son gave it me for Father's Day shortly after we bought Hurstville. And it sort of depicts the sad shape of one kiln, and you can imagine the rest, how they look. But every time there was a heavy rain, or in the spring when the frost heaved up, more stones came out of the kilns and slid down. So thanks to Pat Costello, who headed the interest in restoring the kilns, I believe, but there are other people involved, of course, but a group of volunteer workers and some fundraising enabled the kilns to be saved. A professional stonemason was engaged to help supervise and do this. And this was hard, heavy work. I would say on occasion, after the volunteers are working over there, particularly in the late afternoons in the summer, a cold beer was much appreciated. So how would I sum up the whole experience? It was my exposure, first off, to a partnership. 6 of us who hadn't really been close friends before ended up being in a business venture together, and it survived for a good long time. We had, some of us got older. There were people who died, unfortunately. So Dave Schenthaler moved away. So we ended up, the last few years, it was Bob Stockham and Mrs. Reisling and Mrs. Lamb, who ended up finally selling the property. How would you sum up the whole experience? Well, I started telling you that. I think that one of the things I learned to do was to harvest or oversee harvesting of timber. We sold some walnut trees. I'll brag a little bit, you know, that scene that you saw of the Hurstville School, if you noted to the side of the school there was one walnut tree standing there. I think we sold that tree for $6,000. It was a whopper, and it was a successful learning experience. We planted a lot of trees on the property. We certainly improved the land. Our tenants improved the quality of the farming opportunities and with the terraces and so forth. And we were fortunate that a buyer came along and bought the whole thing from us that was left. We had sold off a couple of smaller tracts periodically. I would tell you that one of the issues which I think we inherited when we became owners of the property was all the fences hadn't been properly maintained on the Hurstville property. And the land on the east side of the river, where there was the big quarry, the second quarry that they opened for Hurstville, because the bridge was gone, there was no land access to that without crossing somebody else's property. The owners of those properties weren't real excited about making that available. We've eventually sold that property on that side of the river, but it was scrub brush and what have you. I can remember walking all over that property a couple of times. I don't think I've ever been in as many thorny bushes in Jackson County anyplace as I was in that piece of the property. It was attractive to poachers and people that were interested in mischief, as well as some Boy Scouts and so forth that got on this land by walking across somebody else's property to get to it. But it's all been sorted out now, and I think that the remnants of that bridge that washed out, or the remnants of the replacement for the bridge that washed out in 1945, were still out on the property. I would also tell you that I thought we gave the limestone, the kilns themselves and the land back to the river, to the Historical Society at the time, but somehow or other it didn't happen that way. And so I think that the Historical Society would benefit from acquiring the additional property there, so you have access to the crushing shed and the kilns and what have you. But I want to congratulate, everybody at the Historical Society for taking on the responsibility and maintaining them. And I think Bonnie will attest that there are visitors stop at the kilns every day, and that it's a great asset for the tourism community and for those who are curious about our history. So I'd be happy to try to answer questions if anybody has any. I didn't do a very good job of covering everything. There's a lot of story to tell. So any questions or comments?
Bob, I'd just like to add one thing, kind of an amusing part. At the time that, there was all this talk and everything like that, and we had one personal checking account at the time, and it was under my name. And I was going off to play bridge the morning of this, when the bids were due, and you had to have a check immediately accompanying your bid. Is that correct? You had to have a check accompanying.
After we had the winning bid, we had to make a payment.
Right away. It wasn't going to be a case of wait. So when I went off to play bridge, Bob said, "Better take the checkbook with you this morning because I may be calling you if we buy this property." Well, I did take the checkbook, but I had no idea that that bid would be successful. I thought there would be so many bids that these guys that were at the drinking coffee would say, "Well, we tried," but it was a surprise.
Well, we've had this arrangement where Ann has a family checkbook. Roger?
Bob, my recollection that Dr. Dalshow had a lot to do with restoration. Am I wrong about that? Did he?
I think he was one of the enthusiastic supporters of it. I remember Pat Costello as being the leader of it. Perhaps Bob Sheets would also have some opinions about that.
Pat definitely helped. He was on the chamber and a real active chamber member and drew a lot of people out there on our volunteer nights to help go and obtain stone from other quarries and bring it to the site. And Pat was actually responsible for finding enough people to build the stairway up to the top. But Ed Kirchhoff and Bob Stockham got together at noon one day. Bob drugged me over to Ed's house and said, "Okay, explain what we need." And we told Ed that it would be great to get a little fire starter going for a fund drive. And Ed just said, "What do you need?" And Stockham said, "Well, $5,000 would get us going." And he said, "Okay, go get my checkbook." And that's what started the project.
So I appreciate your adding that. And I probably knew this and I didn't make a record of it, and I think I forgot it. I'd like to plead my age.
When did the city of Hurstville then disband as a city? Does anybody know?
I'm sorry?
When did the city of Hurstville stop being a city?
It was in the, I don't have a definite
I
date
just
for
know
you.
if anybody else.
I think it's in 1983,
Okay.
but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
that's fine.
I think it was, yeah, that's probably accurate. I think when I came back, it was still a incorporated community, and this would have been in 81, but it was soon after that.
I think I'm within a year or two, but I don't know for sure.
That's fine.
Would you say the main,
I'm sorry?
would you say, Bob, the main purpose of the 6 couples buying the property was to preserve Hurstville or to develop the property, or?
I think we were
Main
excited
goal.
because the world was paying attention to what was happening in Macomb. You do realize that some of us got carried away, got into this project, and I think that other people who were interested in bidding it and who did bid on it, you know, were interested and reportedly asked questions and so forth, but I'm not an expert on golf course design, but we had a very impressive 18-hole golf course designed on that property, which we never implemented. And could have. If you can, those of you who recall what it was like when the new highway was built and how long it took for all this prosperity to follow, and the inconveniences of the construction and what have you, but some of the blessings that occurred. I think the saving of the wetlands and you know, were very, very important to our ecology, and we were glad to cooperate on that. You may recall that there was a wetland, I believe by Welton, and in order to mitigate the number of acres of wetland, that wetland was not redone down by Welton, and the 50-some acres or 40-some acres, whatever it was expanded by at Hurstville, one side of the road or the other. I don't remember. You remember, Bob?
Yeah, they added those wetland mitigation points to the Hurstville project and allowed us to expand it to the west side of the 4-lane. That's an old meander of Schwenker's Creek, but they allowed a stop log structure to be put on that west side to try to maintain some water over there, which it dries out every dry summer like this last summer. But in the average year, it holds a real productive, shallow wetland condition for a lot of wildlife.
Best we can do. Yes.
Overall, and you don't have to answer this if you'd rather not, but overall, with the initial investment and being able to recoup some of the money from the trees and different things and selling off parts of the property, was it a bad investment? I mean, you said already it was good because of the wetlands.
First off, when you get to be my age, you don't remember any bad investments. But I would say that it turned out okay. It took a long time, and it wasn't the most lucrative thing that any of the 6 of us had ever been in, but it was far from being the worst thing we'd ever gotten into. So, it was okay.
That's good.
I'm happy that we did it. It was a great experience, I'm anxious to see what happens next out there. Thank you.
So I just like sorry. So I would just like to show you a couple pictures of the reconstruction. I wondered if maybe Bob Sheets would like to say something about Paul Sagers.
Well, his name is listed first there because Paul had the vision to do something with the kilns long before I ever came to Jackson County. I found out about his vision of hoping to restore them, and that's actually what drove me into trying to get my I-2 sunk into the project and get it going in 1981. But I think Paul was instrumental in making people aware of the potential at Hurstville back in the 50s and 60s. And so he deserves a lot of credit for making people aware of what could happen there, including making me aware of it. Yeah.
Great. So what I see from my perspective, and I wasn't here then, but as I look back over Historical Society records and things like that, I definitely credit Bob Sheets with just doing wonderful things along with these six couples. People like Archie McNeil, he was president of the Historical Society during part of this. Ken Wright worked so hard on this. I see his name on all kinds of things. Dr. Delshaw. Just so many people contributed so much.
I'll second what Bonnie's saying here. I do remember visiting many times with Paul Sagers at the store, talking about Hurstville and the Kilns and that kind of thing. And I also certainly recall Ken Wright's interest and contributions.
Right.
And you know, there's too many people to thank.
I think that's true. But we do thank them all. Roger?
Help me get the history right. Dan Holm did a program few weeks ago in regard to featuring Hearst.
He did.
Who came over in a sailboat. And was that the same Hearst or a son of the?
No, it was, so Alfred Hearst came over from England, okay? He started this. His brother, he and his brother both served in the Civil War.
He was 5 when he came over on the boat.
Yes.
And
Okay.
he was 5.
So this is one and the same.
One and the same.
Yeah.
It is. And they both went to the Civil War, both he and his brother. And then they came back and he was trying to figure out what to do with his life. He was in Davenport. His stepfather was a stonemason and so he learned from him. And he decided that there could be a lot of improvement made in mortar that was used all around the country. And so he started studying and investigating, and he came here because we had the wonderful Maquoketa shale and limestone that made the purest, whitest. We had the water that he needed to do this. We had all of the wonderful hardwood timbers around. So we had everything he needed to make his dream come true, and so that's why he came here. And Dan did do a wonderful job. Dan's program, I think, is on our YouTube channel right now, if you want to go back and watch that. If not, it'll be up there very soon. So I just show you one more picture of them working on the kilns. Is that Myron Rockwell?
No.
No? Okay.
That's Fred Felton from Cascade, the man that did the majority of the work, but Myron did stabilize the north kiln first.
Okay.
He did all the hard grunt work to stabilize that first kiln.
Okay. And I understand as they were working on one kiln, the third kiln, was that the third one?
Third kiln.
Just
collapsed, yeah.
as they were working, just crumbled and collapsed to the ground before they ever got to that one. So they had challenges, but they had work parties, what, every Wednesday night or something?
Yeah.
People went out, and it was all, when everything was all done, Bob organized a corn boil, and I understand they fired up one kiln,
The south kiln.
the South Kiln, and they invited everybody for a big potluck and a corn boil. But it was a wonderful thing that was done. So there are our 4 kilns, the only set of 4 restored lime kilns in the entire United States. I just think that everybody in Jackson County ought to know the story of the kilns, be proud of the kilns, be grateful to these individuals who did so much to save the kilns, because without them they would just be rubble by now. So anyway, it's a great story, a great part of our heritage. So, and Bob is correct, you almost cannot go out there without finding someone there going through their cars day after day. There's just dozens of people stop by, they look around. And right now we have formed a committee. Bill Schwenker is the head of our new committee. And he has several committee members now, some of which are here now. And we're going to be working on some of the ideas, and I don't know if I put some of them up here or not. Some of the ideas that the University of Iowa engineers through the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities that we participated in. We had 2 teams of graduating engineer students come and study the kilns. This particular picture, or this particular thing, they noticed that there's a bulge in this. This is the wall between the 2 kilns. And they noticed a bulge. It's starting to bulge. So they recommended that we drive stakes, pins of some sort. They're 13 foot long, 27 foot long, into the wall in these places to stabilize so that bulge will no longer continue to happen. One of the platforms they recommended that we build, like this is, if you think of this as the top or the chimney of one of the kilns, this is a walking path, steps up to the top of the kiln, a glass plate, walk over the top of the kiln so you can actually look down inside the kiln and you can see what went on. One of the walkways, they designed several different pathways so people could better see what happened there, better enjoy the, that's not very clear, I'm sorry. This is extra parking space. I don't know what happened to that picture, I'm sorry. And we talked about some of the floods that happen out there. This is just one of the early spring floods, if you can see. I haven't been back here that long, but one of the first years I was back here, water was over the top of this building, our little picnic shelter there, completely over the top of it. So that happens almost every year, sometimes a couple times a year. It has to be hard on these kilns, even though this is limestone, and limestone started out under the sea, right? Still, it has to be very hard. So the engineering students, there's another picture of the water. Engineering students came up with a plan that we could use. This is the parking area. I think these are the kilns, and this is kind of a little collection pit, and with some kind of contraption like this that would manage the water flow a little bit. This is what engineering students came up with. So these are things that our committee, that Bill's committee is going to be looking at as we meet together over the winter and try to decide what kind of things we're going to do. Question?
How many kilns were there originally?
4.
There were always just 4. Okay.
Evidently there were plans for 5, because I see in the paperwork here and there mention of a 5th kiln, but it doesn't seem to be that a 5th kiln was ever built. Does anybody, I don't know if anybody knows differently, but evidently he had plans to build a 5th one, but there were 4.
So going with that, the 3rd one crumbled, so they rebuilt it, I assume then?
They did.
Okay.
They did. Something that I'm sure they hope not to happen.
I don't think I remember to mention that at its peak production, they were shipping 8,000 barrels of lime a day from Hurstville.
Thank you for that. And I never can remember the number of cords of wood they burned a day, but it was a tremendous amount of wood that they built. I never can remember that number. But one of the things that the students recommend that we do is we need to replace some of the trees, and they thought that maybe we should look at conifers for some of them, and they just had a lot of ideas. One team of 3 looked at things that would preserve the kilns, to stabilize them better, to save everything. The other group of engineers looked at ways to make the pathways better, make the experience of our visitors safer and better. Now, as you go by the little picnic shelter that our volunteers just roofed, as a matter of fact, and thanks to Bob's help, which was a great thing to get done. But when you go into that picnic area and walk to the north, there's a set of stairs, and you walk up those stairs, and you're at the top of what I call a dike. And as you walk along the dike, straight down is Schwanker's Creek. Or on the maps, it says the Hurstville tributary to the North Fork of the Maquoketa River or something like that. But commonly, I think it's called Schwanker's Creek. But as you look down, it's just almost straight down, and here we have people with little kids running around out there, and you know, sometimes there's not much water in there, but other times when the waters are high and there's been a lot of rain, water is gushing through there. And so there's a lot of things that we need to look at. So anybody who loves the Kilns and is really interested in helping, talk to Bill Schwanker. I'm sure he can find lots of ways that we can help. But we're going to be studying all this. Anyway, thank you all for coming. Thank you especially to Mr. O for coming and telling us the rest of the story. We appreciate that. And thank you to Deb Holm on our board who actually got him here. I've been trying for a long time. And somehow I never got the job done, but she did. So thanks to everybody. Thank you.